My name is Samantha Bennett, 32 years old, and my dreams of starting my own therapy practice almost crumbled when my parents decided that only my twin brother deserved their financial support. After promising to help both of us equally after college, they secretly funneled $400,000 into Nathan's tech startup, while telling me to figure it out myself, because my career choice wasn't ambitious enough. My father thought I would accept this injustice quietly as I always had, but this time he went too far. The consequences were far beyond what any of them could have imagined. Before continuing my story, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Like and subscribe for more family secrets nobody ever talks about. Growing up in a suburban Connecticut home with my twin brother Nathan was a study in contrasts. Despite being fraternal twins born just 4 minutes apart, we couldn't have been more different. Nathan was the golden child, charismatic, bold, and according to our parents, destined for greatness. I was the responsible one, thoughtful, dependable, and perpetually living in his shadow. Our father, Richard Bennett, was a successful investment banker who valued ambition above all else. Our mother, Diane, was a former marketing executive who quit to support Dad's career and raise us. They weren't bad parents. Not really. They provided a comfortable life, paid for our education, and never missed a school event. But there was always an undercurrent of favoritism that I tried to ignore. Nathan just needs more attention, Mom would say whenever I pointed it out. He's got big dreams that require support. Meanwhile, my dreams were treated as cute hobbies. I still remember the day we both graduated from college. Nathan with his business degree and me with my psychology major. Dad raised a glass at our graduation dinner and made what seemed like a heartfelt promise. "Your mother and I are so proud of both of you," he said, looking between us. "We've set aside money to help each of you get started in your careers. Whatever path you choose, we'll support you equally." I believed him. That was my first mistake. After getting my master's degree in clinical psychology, I worked for 3 years at a community mental health center. The work was rewarding, but exhausting, and the pay barely covered my student loans. My dream was to open my own practice specializing in trauma therapy, something the community desperately needed. When I finally felt ready, I created a business plan and scheduled a meeting with my parents. Nathan had been talking about quitting his job at a tech company to launch his own startup, so we decided to present our plans together during a family dinner. "That's impressive, Sam," Dad said after I walked them through my 5-year plan, the market research I'd done, and the $200,000 I would need for office space, equipment, credentials, insurance, and staying afloat until I built a client base. Then Nathan unveiled his idea, a social media platform that would revolutionize how people connect online. His presentation was flashy but vague on details. He needed $400,000 for development, marketing, and operating costs. "This could be the next Facebook," Dad exclaimed, his eyes lighting up in a way they never did for me. Mom nodded enthusiastically. "We'll think about both proposals and let you know," Mom said, but the decision was already written on their faces. 2 weeks later, they called us both over for dinner. The memory still makes my stomach churn. "We've made a decision about the investment funds," Dad announced after dessert. "We're going to fully back Nathan's startup. The potential return is just too good to pass up." I sat there stunned. "What about my practice?" Dad cleared his throat. "Sam, honey, we've always admired your compassion, but therapy practices just don't scale. Nathan's idea could change the world." "But you promised to support us equally," I reminded him, my voice shaking. "Sometimes being a parent means making tough decisions about where to allocate resources," Mom chimed in. "Nathan's venture simply has more growth potential." "You're smart and resourceful," Dad added. "You'll figure it out. Maybe take out a business loan like other people do?" Nathan at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, but he didn't speak up. I left their house that night feeling betrayed in a way I couldn't articulate. It wasn't just about the money. It was about being deemed less worthy of investment, less likely to succeed, less important. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I had never experienced before. For years, I had accepted my place in the family hierarchy, always understanding, always forgiving. But something had broken inside me. I decided then that I would open my practice without their help, and I would never again seek their approval or support. What I didn't know then was that this decision would change everything, not just for me, but for all of us. After the devastating dinner with my parents, I threw myself into making my dream happen independently. I took on extra shifts at the mental health center, started a weekend telehealth gig, and drastically cut my expenses. I moved from my decent one-bedroom apartment to a tiny studio that barely fit my bed and desk. Vacations, new clothes, and dining out became distant memories. Every penny I saved went into my practice fund. Progress was painfully slow. At this rate, it would take years to save enough to open my practice the way I envisioned. Meanwhile, Nathan quit his job and dove into his startup with our parents' money. He rented a sleek office space downtown, hired a team of developers, and began building his revolutionary platform. 6 months into my saving journey, I received an unexpected call from Dr. Catherine Walsh, my former supervisor and mentor. "I'm retiring earlier than expected," she said. "Health issues. I need to wind down my practice within the next few months, and I immediately thought of you, Samantha." My heart raced as she continued. "I have a loyal client base, many of whom would transfer to you if you're interested. I could also sell you my office equipment, lease, and even introduce you to my referral network." This was an incredible opportunity, but there was a catch. I needed $80,000 within 3 months, far more than I had saved. After hanging up, I called every bank in town. But with my student debt and modest income, no one would approve a business loan that size. Desperate, I swallowed my pride and called my parents. Dad picked up on the third ring. "I wouldn't be asking if it wasn't important," I explained after outlining Dr. Walsh's offer. "It's a fraction of what I originally needed, and the opportunity won't come around again." There was a long pause before Dad responded. "Sam, we've already allocated our investment funds to Nathan's business. Things are actually a bit tight right now. We've had to put more in than expected. The development costs were higher than anticipated. I'm not asking for a gift," I clarified. "This could be a loan with interest." "I don't think that's a good idea," he said firmly. "Mixing family and finances can get messy. Why don't you try crowdfunding? Nathan says that's how lots of small businesses get started these days." I hung up, feeling hollow. They weren't just refusing to help. They were suggesting I beg online while they poured money into Nathan's project. That weekend, I visited my grandmother Evelyn, my father's mother. We'd always been close, though she lived 2 hours away in a small coastal town. Unlike my parents, Grandma Evelyn always treated Nathan and me equally. She listened intently as I poured out my frustrations. "Your grandfather and I always knew Richard played favorites," she said, shaking her head. "We tried to talk to him about it, but he's stubborn as a mule." Before I left, she pressed an envelope into my hands. "Don't open this until you get home," she instructed. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a handwritten note. "This was meant to be split between you and Nathan in my will. I'd rather see you use your half now. Make me proud, sweetheart." I cried for an hour, then called her immediately. "Grandma, I can't accept this." "Of course you can," she replied firmly. "Unlike your father, I believe in investing in people with integrity and passion. Find the rest somewhere else if you must, but take this and build something meaningful." With renewed determination, I scraped together the remaining $30,000 through a combination of a small credit union loan, selling my car, and emptying my 401k, despite the penalties. It was terrifying, but within 3 months, I was signing papers to take over Dr. Walsh's practice. The night before my first day as a practice owner, Nathan called. We hadn't spoken much since the family dinner months ago. "Hey, Sam, I heard about your new practice from Mom. That's really cool." He sounded genuinely happy for me. "Thanks," I replied, my tone cooler than intended. "Look, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry about how things went down with the money. I should have said something that night. I appreciated the apology, but it came too late." "It's fine. I figured it out myself, like Dad suggested. I tried to convince them to help you too, but Dad was so excited about the startup and— It's done, Nathan, I interrupted. I've made my peace with it. I have to focus on my business now. Well, congratulations anyway. Maybe once Revolution Connect takes off, I can be your first investor if you want to expand. I thanked him politely, but inside, I knew I would never accept a dime from him or my parents again. What I didn't know was that fate had other plans that would test all of us in ways we couldn't imagine. The first 6 months of running my practice were both exhilarating and terrifying. Dr. Walsh had been true to her word. About 60% of her clients chose to continue therapy with me, providing a crucial foundation of steady income. But building a business wasn't just about therapy skills. It meant becoming an expert in billing, marketing, networking, and a dozen other areas I'd never trained for. I worked 14-hour days, starting with 7 a.m. sessions for clients who needed appointments before work and ending with paperwork that often kept me at the office until 9 p.m. I couldn't afford administrative help yet, so every task fell to me. Some nights I was so exhausted I slept on the small couch in my office rather than making the 30-minute drive home. During this time, Nathan's startup seemed to be thriving, at least according to my parents. Revolution Connect had launched in beta, and Dad couldn't stop talking about the tech blogs that had featured it. Mom showed me photos of Nathan's team at their sleek office space, beaming with pride as if they were pictures of her grandchildren. "Your brother is really disrupting the social media landscape," Dad told me during a rare Sunday dinner at their house. "They're projecting 10,000 users by the end of the quarter." I nodded politely, while thinking about how I'd helped 3 trauma survivors work through significant breakthroughs that week. Real human impact that would never make headlines or impress my father. Around month 7, something unexpected happened. My practice began to turn a corner. Word-of-mouth referrals increased as satisfied clients recommended me to friends. A feature in a local magazine about women entrepreneurs brought in new clients. 2 insurance panels finally approved me, opening access to more patients. For the first time, I could breathe a little. I hired a part-time receptionist, Julia, who transformed my scheduling chaos into organized efficiency. I even started a support group for trauma survivors that quickly reached capacity. One evening, after a particularly meaningful therapy session with a client who'd made remarkable progress, I sat in my office feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. My practice wasn't just surviving, it was becoming exactly what I'd envisioned. A healing space where people found the support they needed. The next morning, Julia transferred a call to me from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Dr. Samantha Bennett?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, this is Samantha," I confirmed, still not comfortable with the doctor title despite my PhD. "My name is Meredith Collins. I'm a reporter with the Boston Globe. I'm working on a feature about innovative mental health practices in New England. And your name came up repeatedly during my research." My heart skipped a beat. It did. Yes. Several colleagues mentioned your trauma-focused approach and community outreach. I'd love to interview you for the piece. 2 weeks later, the article was published, a full-page spread highlighting my practice's unique approach to trauma therapy. The phone started ringing off the hook. We had to create a waiting list for new clients. That evening, my grandmother called. "I've just finished reading the article 3 times, she said, her voice brimming with pride. "I've already mailed copies to everyone in my bridge club." "Thanks, Grandma. I couldn't have done this without you." "Nonsense. The money helped, but this success is all yours, Samantha." I wanted to share this moment of professional recognition with my parents, so I texted them a link to the article. Mom responded quickly with, "Congratulations, honey. We're proud of you." Dad sent a thumbs-up emoji. No call, no questions about how business was going. I tried not to let it bother me. A week later, Julia knocked on my office door between sessions. "Your brother is here. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important." Nathan looked different. Tired, with dark circles under his eyes and a rumpled shirt that wasn't his usual crisp style. "Can we talk?" he asked. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What's going on?" He ran his hands through his hair. A nervous habit from childhood. Revolution Connect is in trouble, he admitted. Our user growth has stalled. Investors are getting nervous. Dad's freaking out. I'm sorry to hear that, I said carefully. But I'm not sure how I can help. I'm not here for help, he clarified. I just needed someone to talk to who isn't going to panic or make me feel worse. Mom and Dad are constantly asking for updates and solutions, and I don't have any right now. For the first time in years, I saw my twin without the golden child glow our parents had bestowed on him. He was just a stressed businessman facing failure like countless others. What are you going to do? I asked. Pivot, I guess. Try to salvage what we can. The problem is, we've already gone through most of the money, and I'll need more to make significant changes. I nodded, understanding the predicament all too well. Have you talked to Mom and Dad about more funding? Nathan laughed bitterly. They've already put in another $150,000 beyond the initial investment. Dad took it from their retirement savings. He didn't tell Mom until after he'd transferred the money. I felt a chill. This wasn't just about Nathan's business anymore. Our parents' financial security was now at stake. The family dynamics that had shaped our entire lives were about to shift dramatically, and none of us were prepared for what would come next. 2 months after Nathan's unexpected visit to my office, I received a text from my mother asking if I could come over for dinner that evening. Something in her phrasing, "We need to discuss some family matters," set off alarm bells. I rescheduled my last client of the day and drove to my parents' house with a sense of foreboding. The atmosphere was tense from the moment I arrived. Dad looked older somehow, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. Mom fluttered around the kitchen, overly cheerful in that way she got when she was masking anxiety. Nathan sat at the dining table, staring at his untouched plate. "So," I said after several minutes of strained small talk, "what's this family matter we need to discuss?" Dad cleared his throat. "Revolution Connect is shutting down. We've exhausted all options." Despite my complicated feelings about the situation, I felt a pang of sympathy for my brother. "I'm sorry, Nathan. That must be really difficult." He nodded, his expression grim. "We tried everything. New features, aggressive marketing, even approaching venture capitalists for additional funding. But our user retention was abysmal, and our revenue projections couldn't justify more investment." Dad jumped in, his voice tight. "The problem is that this failure has significant financial implications for all of us." "All of us?" I repeated, confused. "I didn't invest anything in Revolution Connect." Mom set down her fork. "Your father isn't just talking about the initial investment. There's been more." Over the next 20 minutes, the full picture emerged. Beyond the initial $400,000, my parents had poured another $350,000 into Nathan's failing business, draining their retirement accounts, taking out a second mortgage on their house, and even liquidating the education fund they'd started for Nathan's 2-year-old son, my nephew Jack. "We were so certain it would turn around," Dad explained, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen him. Every time Nathan came to us with a new strategy, it seemed like the answer. "The house payments are becoming difficult," Mom admitted quietly, "and we've already fallen behind on some of our bills." I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of the situation. My parents, who had always been financially secure and responsible, had gambled away their retirement and home on Nathan's unproven business venture. "What about your consulting work, Dad?" I asked. After semi-retiring from investment banking 5 years ago, he took on occasional consulting projects. He shook his head. "The market's been slow, and my network isn't what it used to be. I've been trying, but nothing substantial has come through." I turned to Nathan. "And what are you planning to do now?" "I've applied for some tech director positions," he said. "But companies aren't exactly lining up to hire someone whose startup just failed spectacularly. And with Jack and Emma's second baby on the way," his voice trailed off. The weight of unspoken expectations hung in the air. They hadn't explicitly asked for my help, but their desperate glances in my direction made their hopes clear. A year ago, I might have immediately offered whatever I could, desperate for their approval. But I was different now. My practice was flourishing, yes, but I'd worked myself to the bone for that success. Every dollar had been earned through my own efforts and sacrifices, without their support. I need some time to think about this, I said finally, rising from the table. This is a lot to process. Of course, honey, Mom said quickly. We just wanted you to know what's happening. Dad looked like he wanted to say more, but he just nodded stiffly. As I drove home, conflicting emotions battled within me. Part of me felt a vindictive satisfaction. Wasn't this exactly what they deserved after dismissing my business as unworthy of investment? Another part felt genuine concern for my parents' well-being. And still, another part was furious that they'd been so reckless with money that could have secured their future. Back at my apartment, I made a cup of tea and called Grandma Evelyn. After telling her everything, I asked the question weighing on me. What would you do if you were me? That depends, she said thoughtfully. Are you asking what the kind thing to do is, or the right thing? Is there a difference? Sometimes. Her voice was gentle but firm. The kind thing might be to bail them out without conditions. The right thing might be more complicated. I don't even know if I can help them, I admitted. The practice is doing well, but not bail out my entire family well. Then perhaps the question isn't how much you can give, but what terms should come with whatever help you do offer. After we hung up, I spent hours running numbers, examining my finances, and contemplating what I was willing to do. By morning, I had made my decision. I would help my family, but this time, I would be the one setting the terms. 3 days after the revelation dinner, I invited my parents and Nathan to my practice after hours. I'd spent those days consulting with my financial advisor and preparing a detailed proposal. As they settled awkwardly into the chairs in my office, I felt a strange reversal of power. For once, I wasn't the one seeking their approval. They were waiting for my judgment. I've thought a lot about your situation, I began, my professional therapist voice automatically kicking in. And I've decided I want to help, but I need to be clear about what I can and cannot do. Relief visibly washed over my mother's face. My father straightened in his chair, his business persona emerging despite the circumstances. That's very generous, Sam, he started. We were thinking... I held up my hand, surprising even myself with the authority in the gesture. Please let me finish. I've prepared a specific proposal based on what I can realistically offer. I handed each of them a folder containing printouts of my plan. I cannot give you the full amount you need. My business is successful, but it's still growing, and I need to maintain its financial health. I took a deep breath before continuing. I can offer you a loan of $150,000 to help with the immediate mortgage issues and essential bills. This will be a formal loan with paperwork drawn up by my attorney, not a gift. Dad's expression tightened at the mention of an attorney, but he remained silent. The terms are as follows: 5 years, with minimal interest, just enough to make it legally binding. Monthly payments will begin in 6 months to give you time to stabilize. I turned to Nathan next. I've also spoken with Dr. Walsh and some other contacts in the healthcare technology field. There's a growing mental health startup that needs someone with your development skills for their patient management platform. It's not as glamorous as Revolution Connect, but it's a stable position with good pay and benefits. They're willing to interview you next week. Nathan looked surprised. You'd do that for me after everything? You're still my brother, I said simply. But that leads me to the conditions of this arrangement. I squared my shoulders, knowing this next part would be the most difficult. First, I want full transparency about your finances going forward. You'll need to work with a financial advisor. I've found one who specializes in retirement reclamation, and follow their recommendations. Dad started to protest, but Mom placed a restraining hand on his arm. Second, you need to sell the lake house. The vacation property had been their pride and joy for the last decade, a symbol of my father's success. It's a luxury you can no longer afford, and the proceeds will help stabilize your situation. That house has been our dream, Dad began. Dreams change, I interrupted gently but firmly. This isn't about punishment, Dad. It's about facing reality. And the third condition? Mom asked quietly. We need to change how we function as a family. I'm suggesting monthly family therapy sessions. Not with me, obviously, but with a colleague I trust. We have patterns and dynamics that have damaged all of us in different ways. And if we're going to move forward, we need to address them. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan studied his hands while my parents exchanged looks I couldn't quite interpret. Finally, Dad spoke. You've clearly put a lot of thought into this. Can we have some time to discuss it privately? Of course, I replied. Take the weekend to review everything. But I want to be clear. These conditions aren't negotiable. This is the only help I'm prepared to offer, and only under these terms. As they left my office, I felt neither triumph nor guilt, just a calm certainty that I had made the right decision. For the first time, I was engaging with my family from a position of strength rather than need. The next morning, I met with Grandma Evelyn for breakfast at her favorite diner. She listened intently as I recounted the meeting. You should have seen Dad's face when I mentioned selling the lake house, I told her. It was like I'd suggested selling one of his children. She snorted. Richard has always been too attached to status symbols. Your grandfather was the same way. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, Samantha. You offered help without sacrificing your boundaries. They haven't accepted yet, I reminded her. They will, she said confidently. They don't have better options, and deep down, Richard knows it. She was right. Sunday evening, my mother called to say they accepted all the conditions. Your father struggled with the lake house, she admitted. But I helped him see that our family is more important than a property. 2 days later, we all met at my attorney's office to sign the loan documents. The atmosphere was subdued but not hostile. As we prepared to leave, Nathan pulled me aside. I've been thinking a lot about what happened with Revolution Connect, he said. I got caught up in Dad's vision of success and lost sight of building something actually useful. That mental health startup. It sounds like something meaningful. It is, I assured him. Their platform helps connect people in rural areas with telehealth providers. It's making a real difference. He nodded thoughtfully. That's the kind of work I should have been doing all along. As I watched them walk to their car, I realized that while the family dynamics hadn't completely transformed overnight, something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in our lives, I wasn't just Nathan's overshadowed twin sister. I was Samantha Bennett, the successful practice owner whose judgment they now respected. The road ahead would be challenging for all of us. But for the first time, I believed we might actually become a healthier family on the other side of this crisis. The transition from being the overlooked daughter to the family's financial savior was strange and occasionally uncomfortable. In the weeks following our agreement, I noticed subtle changes in how my parents interacted with me. Dad began asking about my business strategies. Mom started sending referrals, friends or acquaintances who might benefit from therapy. Their newfound respect felt both validating and oddly disconcerting, as if I'd been speaking a language they suddenly understood after years of miscommunication. Nathan interviewed with the mental health tech company and was offered a position as their development director. The salary was less than he'd made before, but the work connected with him in a way Revolution Connect never had. I'm building something that actually helps people, he told me over coffee one weekend. Yesterday, we launched a feature that lets crisis counselors instantly access resources for clients. It's already being used in 3 states. That's incredible, I said, genuinely happy for him. How does it feel compared to the social media platform? He considered the question. Honestly, it's less glamorous but more satisfying. Dad's a bit disappointed I'm not working on the next big thing. But Emma loves that I come home at reasonable hours and actually talk about my day instead of just stressing about user metrics. The mention of our father prompted me to ask, how are Mom and Dad doing with the financial advisor? Nathan grimaced. It's been an adjustment. Dad hates having someone scrutinize his decisions, especially a woman younger than us. But Mom's really embraced it. I think she's relieved to have someone else telling Dad no for a change. My parents had listed the lake house with a realtor specializing in luxury properties. To everyone's surprise, they received a full-price offer within 2 weeks. The The proceeds would significantly reduce their debt and provide a cushion while they rebuilt their retirement savings. Perhaps the most challenging aspect of our new arrangement was the family therapy sessions. Dr. Linda Friedman, a family systems specialist with 30 years of experience, didn't pull punches or allow deflection, qualities I'd specifically sought when selecting her. Our third session brought the first real breakthrough. Dr. Friedman asked each of us to describe how we perceived our roles in the family. Mom went first, describing herself as the peacekeeper. Dad reluctantly admitted he saw himself as the provider and decision-maker. Nathan confessed he'd always felt pressure to be extraordinary to justify our parents' obvious favoritism. When my turn came, I took a deep breath. I've always been the responsible one, the one who makes sensible choices and never demands attention. I learned early that my achievements would never be celebrated like Nathan's, so I stopped expecting recognition. Dad looked genuinely shocked. That's not true. We've always been proud of you. Being proud isn't the same as showing it, I replied quietly. You invested in Nathan's dream, but dismissed mine as not ambitious enough. Do you have any idea how that felt? We thought we were making a sound business decision, Dad defended, though with less conviction than he might have once shown. Dr. Friedman leaned forward. Richard, try to hear what Samantha is saying. This isn't about the business decision itself, but about the message it sent about how you valued her goals compared to Nathan's. Mom's eyes filled with tears. I never wanted you to feel less important, Sam. I just went along with your father's decisions because that's what I've always done. That's your pattern as a couple, Dr. Friedman observed. Diane, you defer to Richard, and Richard, you make unilateral decisions without fully considering everyone's needs. That pattern contributed significantly to the current situation. By the end of that session, we hadn't resolved everything, but important truths had been spoken aloud for the first time. As we walked to our cars, Dad lingered behind with me. I've been thinking about something, he said hesitantly. When you were little, maybe 7 or 8, you said you wanted to be a doctor. I told you that you weren't cut out for it, that you were too sensitive. Do you remember that? I nodded, the memory still clear after all these years. I've been wondering if that discouraged you from pursuing medicine, if I limited your ambitions without realizing it. I became exactly the kind of doctor I wanted to be, Dad, I said gently. My sensitivity is actually my greatest strength as a therapist. It wasn't your discouragement that hurt me. It was not having your support when I finally knew what I wanted. He nodded slowly. I'm beginning to understand that. For what it's worth, I was wrong. You're an excellent doctor. That small acknowledgement meant more than I expected it to. One evening, about 4 months into our new family dynamic, I received an unexpected visitor at my practice. My father stood awkwardly in the waiting room after my last client had left. Do you have a minute? He asked. I invited him into my office, curious about this uncharacteristic visit. The lake house closing was today, he said, settling into the chair across from me. It was harder than I expected, signing those papers. Change usually is, I acknowledged. He placed an envelope on my desk. This is the first loan repayment. I know it's not due for another 2 months, but the house sold, and I wanted to start fulfilling my obligations immediately. I recognized the gesture for what it was, not just a financial transaction, but a symbolic one. My father was showing me respect. Thank you, I said, accepting the envelope. I also wanted to tell you something, he continued. I've started consulting for smaller businesses, startups run by people who need financial guidance but can't afford big consulting firms. The pay isn't what I'm used to, but it's steady, and I'm helping people avoid the mistakes I made. That sounds fulfilling, I said, genuinely impressed by his adaptation. It is. And I've been thinking a lot about what Dr. Friedman said about my decision-making patterns. He looked around my office, taking in the calm, professional space I'd created. You built all this without my help. In some ways, that makes it more impressive than if I'd bankrolled it. Coming from my father, this was extraordinary praise. As he left, I realized that the family crisis had forced him to see me, really see me, perhaps for the first time in my life. As spring turned to summer, both my practice and our family continued to evolve. I hired a second therapist, Dr. Jordan Feldman, to help manage our growing client list. His specialty in adolescent trauma complemented my focus on adults, allowing us to serve more families comprehensively. We also brought on a full-time office manager, freeing Julia to train as a therapy assistant, a career path she'd become interested in while working with me. "You've created something special here," Jordan told me after his first month. "The patients talk about this place like it's a sanctuary." His words touched me deeply. That had been my vision from the beginning. Not just a medical office, but a genuine place of healing. The warm-toned walls, comfortable furniture, and soft lighting were all intentional choices to create an environment where traumatized people could feel safe enough to be vulnerable. The family therapy sessions, while occasionally difficult, were yielding results. Mom had started asserting herself more, not just with Dad, but in her own life. She volunteered at a women's shelter and was considering taking courses at the community college, dreams she'd abandoned decades ago when she left her career to support Dad's. "I've spent 30 years defining myself by my relationship to other people," she said during one session. "Richard's wife, Nathan, and Samantha's mother. I'm trying to remember who Diane is underneath all that." Dad continued his small business consulting and found an unexpected niche advising women entrepreneurs who appreciated his financial expertise without the condescension they often encountered from other male advisors. He sometimes asked my opinion on how to approach certain clients or situations, a level of professional respect he'd never shown before. "Most of these women have brilliant ideas, but no one's ever taught them the financial language to express them," he told me one evening. "It's not that they can't understand the concepts, they've just been excluded from the conversations." "That sounds familiar," I said pointedly. He had the grace to look embarrassed. "I'm learning, Sam. Slowly, perhaps, but I am learning." Nathan thrived in his new role. The mental health platform expanded to 10 more states, and his team developed a crisis intervention feature that received recognition from several mental health advocacy organizations. His marriage to Emma strengthened as he became more present for her and their children. My nephew Jack adored his father in a way that reminded me that patterns could be broken. "The irony isn't lost on me," Nathan confessed during one of our now regular sibling dinners. "Dad pushed me toward business success my whole life, and I only found it when I stopped trying to impress him and started focusing on something meaningful instead." One Saturday morning in mid-July, I received a call from Grandma Evelyn's neighbor. Grandma had fallen in her garden and was in the hospital with a broken hip. I immediately drove to the small coastal hospital where she'd been admitted, my mind racing with worry. At 82, even a minor fall could have serious complications. "It's not as bad as it could have been," the doctor assured me when I arrived. "The fracture is clean and we've already performed a successful surgery. But at her age, recovery will take time. She shouldn't live alone during her rehabilitation." Grandma, stubborn as ever, insisted she would be fine on her own. "I'll hire someone to check on me," she argued from her hospital bed, her voice strong despite the pain medication. "I'm not leaving my house because of one little fall." "You're coming to stay with me," I told her firmly. "My building has an elevator and I have a spare room. It's not negotiable." She gave me a calculating look. "You've gotten bossy in your old age, Samantha." "I learned from the best," I replied, and we both knew I meant her. To my surprise, my parents and Nathan arrived at the hospital an hour later, concern evident on their faces. "We called them," Grandma admitted when I raised an eyebrow. "We're a family. Families face challenges together." The simple statement, delivered with her usual no-nonsense attitude, moved me deeply. A year ago, I might have handled this crisis alone, not expecting much support from my family. Now, here they all were, ready to help without hesitation. Over the next few days, we all worked to prepare for Grandma's discharge. Nathan and Emma helped adapt my spare room for her needs, installing grab bars and a special chair in the shower. Mom organized a schedule for who would stay with Grandma when I was at work. Dad researched physical therapists who made home visits and arranged for the best one to come to my apartment 3 times a week. "You don't have to do all this," I told him as he meticulously compared therapists' credentials. "I want to," he said simply. Your grandmother was right about a lot of things, including how I played favorites with you and Nathan. She called me out on it years ago, and I didn't listen. This is the least I can do. The night before Grandma was to be discharged, we all gathered at my apartment. As we shared a meal around my small dining table, I was struck by how different we were from the family that had gathered for that fateful dinner a year ago. The crisis that could have permanently fractured us had instead forced us to rebuild on a healthier foundation. After dinner, Mom pulled me aside. "I've been wanting to tell you something," she said, her voice quiet so the others wouldn't hear. "I found some old journals of mine from when you and Nathan were little. Reading them has been illuminating." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I wrote about how different you two were, even as toddlers. Nathan was always demanding attention, throwing tantrums if he didn't get his way. You were so self-sufficient, so capable of entertaining yourself." Her eyes filled with tears. "I wrote that I was grateful for how easy you were, because Nathan took so much energy. But reading it now, I realize we didn't give you the attention you deserved precisely because you didn't demand it." I felt a lump form in my throat. I always thought being the good child would eventually be noticed and valued. "It should have been," she said, squeezing my hand. "I'm so sorry it took a financial crisis for us to see you clearly." Her apology soothed a wound I'd carried for decades, the feeling that my reliability was taken for granted rather than appreciated. We rejoined the others, and I noticed Dad watching us with a questioning look. Mom gave him a small nod, and something passed between them that suggested they'd discussed this conversation beforehand. 2 weeks after Grandma moved in with me, I received an email that would change the trajectory of my practice. Dr. Andrea Morales, the director of a prestigious mental health institute in Boston, wanted to meet to discuss a potential collaboration. She'd read the Globe article and heard about my work from colleagues. I was so excited I could hardly sleep the night before our meeting. The institute was at the forefront of trauma research and treatment in New England. Even being invited to discuss a collaboration felt like a professional milestone. Our meeting lasted 3 hours. Dr. Morales explained that the institute was expanding its trauma treatment program and wanted to incorporate my approach. They were offering me a partnership. I would continue running my practice while also developing training protocols for their clinicians and contributing to their research. "This could significantly expand your impact," she explained. "Your methods could help thousands rather than hundreds." "Why me?" I asked, genuinely curious. "There must be more established practitioners you could partner with." "Because your approach integrates the newest evidence-based techniques with a genuine compassion that can't be taught," she replied. "And frankly, because your outcomes speak for themselves. Your client improvement metrics are exceptional." The opportunity was everything I'd dreamed of but never thought possible so early in my career. As I drove home, I couldn't wait to share the news. I found Grandma in the living room, working on a crossword puzzle while my parents chatted with her. Nathan and his family were coming for dinner later. "You're glowing," Grandma observed as I walked in. "Good news?" I told them about the Institute's offer, trying to contain my excitement. To my surprise, Dad was the first to respond. "That's extraordinary, Sam," he said, genuine pride in his voice. "They're recognizing what we should have seen years ago, that your approach to therapy is genuinely innovative. This is exactly the kind of scaling potential I always talk about," he continued thoughtfully. "Not every business needs to be a tech startup to have significant growth and impact." Coming from him, this was a profound acknowledgement. My mother wiped away tears, and Grandma looked smugly satisfied, as if she'd known all along this would happen. When Nathan arrived with Emma and the kids, we celebrated with takeout Chinese food and sparkling cider. As we gathered around my dining table, now extended with a folding table to accommodate everyone, I looked at the faces of my family and felt a complex mix of emotions. "Remember when you were 10, Nathan said during dinner, "and you set up a feelings doctor booth in the backyard like Lucy from Peanuts? 5 cents for advice?" "I'd forgotten about that," Mom exclaimed. "You were so serious about it. You even made little appointment cards." "The neighborhood kids actually came," Dad recalled, chuckling. Mrs. Peterson from next door told us you helped her son feel better about being afraid of the dark. My first client, I said, smiling at the memory. I told him that brave people feel fear too. They just find ways to face it anyway. You were always meant to do this work, Nathan said. I should have been coming to your booth for advice instead of competing with you all those years. There was still healing to be done, patterns to be unlearned, and trust to be rebuilt. But for the first time, I felt truly seen and valued by the people whose approval I'd sought for so long, only to discover that I no longer needed it to recognize my own worth. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and Grandma had retired to her room, I sat on my balcony looking at the city lights. A text from Nathan lit up my phone. Congratulations again, sis. You deserved this recognition long ago. I smiled, thinking about how far we'd all come. The family's financial crisis had forced us to confront uncomfortable truths, but it had also created space for something new to grow, something healthier and more authentic than what came before. The following weekend, I visited Dr. Walsh to share my news about the Institute partnership. Though retired, she remained a mentor and friend. We met at her favorite cafe where she listened intently as I described the opportunity. I always knew you were destined for more than a small private practice, she said when I finished. Your ability to connect with people in their darkest moments is a rare gift. I learned that from you, I told her sincerely. She shook her head. I taught you techniques and protocols, the compassion and intuition. That's all you, Samantha. That's why I chose you to take over my practice. She hesitated, then added, I knew about your family situation, you know. Not the details, but I could see the patterns in how you talked about them. Was it that obvious? I asked, surprised. To a therapist with 40 years of experience? Yes. Her eyes crinkled with warmth. I recognized in you someone who had learned to thrive despite not getting the support they deserved. That resilience makes you a better therapist. As I drove home, I reflected on how my personal struggles had indeed shaped my professional abilities. The same sensitivity that made my childhood difficult had become my greatest strength as a therapist. The independence I'd developed from lack of parental support had prepared me to build my practice without their help. Perhaps, in some strange way, my parents' favoritism had given me precisely the qualities I needed to succeed, not because of their support, but because of its absence. The thought wasn't entirely comforting, but it offered a new perspective on my journey. 1 year after my parents' financial collapse, we gathered at their new home for Thanksgiving. They'd sold their 2-large suburban house along with the lake property and downsized to a comfortable condo in a vibrant mixed-age community. The space was smaller but felt warmer somehow, less like a showcase and more like a home. Mom had decorated with family photos, not just the perfect holiday portraits she'd always favored, but candid shots that captured genuine moments. I noticed with pleasure that the photos of Nathan and me were displayed equally. Neither of us featured more prominently than the other. Grandma Evelyn, fully recovered from her fall, had decided to sell her coastal house and move into a senior living community just 10 minutes from my practice. I'm tired of maintaining that big place, she'd declared, and I want to be closer to all of you while I still have my wits about me. Plus, she'd added with a wink, the community has an impressive ratio of widowers to widows. Better odds for a woman of my advanced charms. The dining table was crowded with dishes, Mom's traditional turkey, Nathan's wife Emma's famous sweet potato casserole, and my pumpkin cheesecake, among others. Jack, now 3, chased his 1-year-old sister Lily around the living room while the adults finished preparing the meal. I helped Mom in the kitchen, our movements around each other easier than they'd ever been. She seemed more relaxed in this smaller space than she had in her showcase kitchen, humming as she prepared the cranberry sauce from scratch. I used to be so concerned about making everything perfect, she confessed as she stirred. The right china, the perfect centerpiece, everything Instagram-worthy before Instagram existed. Now I just want us to enjoy being together. This is better, I assured her, squeezing her shoulder gently. The weekly family therapy sessions had ended 2 months ago, by mutual agreement and with Dr. Friedman's blessing. We still had occasional difficult moments, but we'd developed healthier communication patterns and a deeper understanding of each other's perspectives. Most importantly, we'd learned to address issues as they arose rather than letting resentments fester. As we settled around the table, Dad stood to carve the turkey, a task he'd always performed with ceremonial precision. But before beginning, he set down the carving tools and cleared his throat. "Before we eat, I'd like to say something." He looked uncharacteristically emotional. "This past year has been humbling. A year ago, I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. My investments, my reputation, my sense of security." Mom reached over and took his hand, encouraging him to continue. "What I've learned is that I never had the right definition of success to begin with. I was so focused on financial achievements and status that I missed what was truly valuable." He looked around the table, his eyes lingering on each of us. "This family is my true wealth, and I'm especially grateful that we've found our way to a healthier place together." He turned to me. "Samantha, I want to thank you publicly for what you did for this family. Not just the financial help, though that was significant, but for having the courage to set boundaries and insist on changes that were long overdue." I felt tears threatening, but managed to smile. "We all did the work, Dad." "Yes, but you led the way." He raised his glass. "To Samantha, whose success reminds me daily that my definition of achievement was far too narrow." As everyone raised their glasses, I felt a complex swirl of emotions: gratitude, vindication, and a deep sense of peace that had been long in coming. "And to Nathan," Dad continued, surprising me, "who showed tremendous courage in starting over and finding work that truly matters." Nathan looked as startled as I felt. Dad had never been one for emotional speeches, let alone public acknowledgement of his own mistakes. "And to Mom," Nathan added, raising his glass higher, "who's finally pursuing her own dreams after supporting everyone else's for so long." Mom blushed, but looked pleased. She'd started taking photography classes at the community college and had recently had one of her photos selected for a student exhibition. After dinner, while Nathan and Emma put the children down for naps in the guest room, I helped Mom and Dad clean up in the kitchen. The easy rhythm of our cooperation reflected our new dynamics: more equal, more respectful, more authentic. "I had a call with the financial advisor yesterday," Dad mentioned as he rinsed dishes. "She says we're on track to rebuild a modest but secure retirement fund within 5 years. It won't be what we once had, but it will be enough." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased for them. "And I've paid off another portion of your loan," he added. "At this rate, we'll clear it within 3 years instead of 5. "There's no rush," I assured him. "The practice is doing exceptionally well, especially with the Institute partnership." "Even so," he insisted, "meeting obligations is important to me." Mom smiled at our exchange. "Your father is learning that keeping promises is about more than financial transactions. It's about trust." Dad nodded, acknowledging the deeper meaning in her words. "The hardest part of this whole experience wasn't losing the money," he admitted. "It was facing how my actions had damaged my relationships with all of you, especially you, Samantha." The frank admission touched me deeply. A year ago, such vulnerability from my father would have been unimaginable. Later, as we all relaxed in the living room, Grandma Evelyn shared news about her move to the senior community. "I've already joined their theater group," she announced. "We're doing The Importance of Being Earnest in the spring. I'm playing Lady Bracknell." "That's perfect casting," Nathan teased. "You've been perfecting that disapproving aristocratic look all your life." She swatted him playfully with a throw pillow. "Cheeky boy. But you're not wrong." Jack woke from his nap and climbed onto my lap, showing me a drawing he'd made at preschool. "It's you, Aunt Sam," he explained, pointing to a stick figure with an enormous smile. "You're happy because you help people feel better." "That's exactly right," I told him, touched by his simple understanding of my work. "Daddy helps people feel better with his computer stuff too," he added proudly. Nathan caught my eye over Jack's head, and I saw in his expression the same fulfillment I felt in my own work, the satisfaction of creating something meaningful. As afternoon faded into evening, I stepped onto my parents' small balcony for a moment of quiet reflection. The view wasn't as impressive as their old homes, but the city lights had their own beauty. Nathan joined me, handing me a cup of coffee. "Penny, for your thoughts?" "I was just thinking about how different things are from last Thanksgiving," I said. "Remember how tense it was? Mom trying to pretend everything was fine while Dad kept checking his phone for news about Revolution Connect's latest metrics?" He grimaced. "Not my finest hour. I was so desperate to make that business work that I couldn't see how toxic the whole situation had become. And now? Now I'm developing tools that actually help people," he said with quiet satisfaction. "Last week, we rolled out our platform to a rural hospital network. They estimate it will connect over 5,000 patients with mental health services they couldn't access before." "That's incredible, Nathan." "It's meaningful," he agreed. "And that matters more than I understood before." He hesitated before adding, "I'm sorry it took me so long to appreciate what you were trying to do with your practice." "We're both where we need to be now," I said. "That's what matters." We stood in companionable silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been if Mom and Dad had funded your practice from the beginning?" I considered the question carefully. I'd probably be further along in some ways, but I wouldn't have built the same resilience or independence. And honestly, I'm not sure our family would have had the opportunity to address our deeper issues. "So, you're saying their terrible financial decision was actually a blessing in disguise?" He raised an eyebrow skeptically. I laughed. "I wouldn't go that far. But sometimes the painful paths lead to necessary destinations." "Emma's pregnant again," he said suddenly. "We just found out last week. We're waiting until the first trimester ends to tell everyone, but I wanted you to know first." "Nathan, that's wonderful." I gave him a quick hug. "How are you feeling about it?" "Terrified and excited," he admitted. "But mostly grateful that my kids will grow up in this version of our family, not the one we had as children." His words crystallized something I'd been feeling but hadn't fully articulated. The healing we'd done wasn't just for ourselves. It would ripple outward to the next generation and beyond. Back inside, I found Dad helping Jack build a tower with blocks while Lily watched from Emma's lap. The sight of my father, once so focused on status and success, patiently working with his grandson, struck me as the perfect symbol of our family's transformation. My practice continued to thrive. The Institute partnership had expanded my professional reach beyond anything I'd imagined possible. I was now supervising 3 associates and had started writing a book about trauma therapy approaches. My reputation in the field was growing steadily, bringing opportunities I'd never dreamed of. But my greatest achievement wasn't professional at all. It was participating in the healing of my family, not as their therapist, but as a daughter and sister who finally found her voice and her place. The loan I'd extended to my parents wasn't just about money. It was about changing our power dynamic. The conditions I'd attached weren't punitive, but transformative. And though the financial aspect mattered, the real value was in the new patterns we'd established. Patterns of respect, honesty, and mutual support. Before leaving that evening, I helped Mom pack leftovers for everyone. "I've been thinking about starting a small photography business," she confided as we worked. "Just portraits to begin with, maybe events later. My instructor thinks I have a good eye." "You should do it," I encouraged her. "Your photos from Jack's birthday were better than the professional ones Nathan and Emma hired last year." "I might need some business advice," she said hesitantly. "Would you have time to help me put together a basic plan?" The request, so simple yet so meaningful, demonstrated how far we'd come. My mother was not only pursuing her own dreams, but valuing my expertise in a way she never had before. "I'd be happy to," I told her. "And I know an excellent financial advisor who specializes in small creative businesses." As we gathered for a family photo before departing, I caught my reflection in the window. I saw someone confident and at peace, not defined by others' expectations or limitations, but by her own choices and values. The journey hadn't been easy, but standing among my imperfect, evolving family, I knew with absolute certainty that it had been worth it. "Samantha, you're miles away," Mom called, waving me over to the group. "Not miles," I said, joining them with a smile. "I'm right where I belong."